Then very importantly, you will report the results. Okay, and these are the kinds of things that you do when you report results. You present them, you present the procedures that you did, you restate your research questions or your hypotheses possibly, you mention the sort of data, what kind of data you have, and you highlight what's important in the data, and you provide evidence for what you're saying. So you will provide statistics or examples or diagrams, this sort of thing. Then, again, very importantly, you will comment on the results. So you will interpret them, you will make some claims about your results, you'll look for contribution that's made in terms of these results, the significance of them. You'll possibly compare your proceedings with other studies and justify your own methods. And you'll comment on limitations, generalizability, etc. Then you'll conclude your chapter. It's move 4. And it's just really an ordinary kind of conclusion, I think. Pulls together what's in the chapter and brings the reader to, okay, so where are we now? It's the so what bit of your chapter. So that would be the results. Then the discussion. Now this would be interpretive rather than descriptive. Okay, I think that's really important. And these are the sorts of points that Swales talks about that you might well make. And they no particular order, they're just here. You give a bit of background maybe, you'll talk about the purpose, you'll refer to theory, you might refer to methodology, you'll talk about the significance or lack of significance of your results, or the importance, the lack of importance, you'll say why. You'll talk about the outcomes being expected or unexpected, give examples, and you'll mention the strengths of the study. All those kinds of things would happen when you interpret your results. And then move 2, that's over the page, would be evaluating the results. So here you will talk about the limitations, you'll indicate what cannot be concluded from the research, you'll talk again about significance of the study, and possibly an evaluation of your methods or even of the field of study. It sort of depends really a lot on your disciplinary field. I'm being very sort of tentative here because I think one can only be tentative. Different, even within the same disciplinary field, different dissertations and theses look very different from each other. But these are the sorts of things that you need to be talking about. Then in the conclusion, you do the sorts of things we're talking about. You summarize your findings, you look back at your thesis, you talk about the contribution, the claims that are made, you sort of emphasize those, and then comes the recommendations. If you make recommendations, you should, I've said here, include the benefits of carrying out the recommendations and the implications. So that would include future research, practical applications, and limitations. Okay, so now this is where you get to think about how this writer, in this article, how they have structured and put together the results, the discussion, and the conclusion. Now this is in a mini form. It won't do all those introduction to chapters, conclusion to chapters, things that sort of are so important in a thesis or dissertation. But it will achieve quite a lot, I think, of the sorts of things that we've been talking about. So the first page is, or should be, the cover page, which gives you the abstract. I would suggest that you look at the abstract first. Have you got that on your copy?
Yep.
The abstract. Just have a look at it so that you can get a sort of bird's eye view of what the paper's about. Then, again, in your group, what I want you to do is to have a look at the section that begins with results. Where does the discussion start? Is it separate from the results? How has the writer dealt with this? Can you find any of these purposes that we've said are important in your dissertation chapters? Can you find these writers actually achieving these purposes? Where are they making claims? Where are they talking about limitations? Where are they talking about significance? Do they refer back to the research aims? All these sorts of things that we've been talking about. And then the conclusion as well, you can have a look at that and see how that is structured and whether it's achieving those purposes that we have been talking about with regard to the dissertation. So this would be a miniature form, as it were. Right, so we'll have about 25 minutes to look at that. And I'm going to ask the groups to feed back what some groups are really looking agitated. Really don't need to be agitated. You can always blame the rest of your group. If you don't think it was a good idea, say my group said. So if you can have a look using this as a sort of a template, the kinds of things that I've suggested happen in research, in results, in discussion, in the conclusion section. Can you identify those here? Nowhere do they talk about discussion. Where does the discussion begin? Is it discrete? Can you see a difference between discussion and results? These are interesting questions to ask about this paper. But you do need to look at the abstract first, because you'll see what the aim is. And you can't really talk about whether the writer is achieving things properly if you don't know what their aim is. So start off with the abstract. Okay. Was that you noticed or found interesting or observed about what these writers were doing? Okay, first of all, could you distinguish between results and discussion? Yeah. Yes? No?
It sort of drifted into discussion at one point.
Yeah.
But there was no heading, obviously, as we noted.
Okay, well, you might as well kick off. What kind of observations? I'm picking on you.
I know. Yeah. Okay, I'll try with some first comments, perhaps. We noted the very heavy and rigorous attention to the process, which was mentioned earlier, technical and all very, very very tight. And then when it drifted into the discussion, it almost becomes, by contrast, quite loose and quite unlinked to those statistics. So it just is almost like a schizophrenic jump into kind of discussion, and it's very loose compared to the rigor. So it's almost as though, and this is a terrible, terrible indictment perhaps of some management and IT type research, it's that if your methodology is strong, you can kind of get away with anything, and that's a very interesting comment.
Which is exactly what I have been trying to emphasize this afternoon, that I think this is what examiners often find, a great emphasis on producing the data and describing the data, and then when it comes to the discussion, the significance, the evaluative aspects, it's thin.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I've been trying to emphasize, and we're seeing an example of it here, maybe. Yeah. Okay, what about your group? Did you have anything to add to that, something different? Did you see any of these aspects that we mentioned?
Yeah, we noted something on the third paragraph, under reliability of the research instrument. We noted something from move 3, makes comparison with previous studies, justification of method or procedure. Okay, this person said based on the current literature on KM and the significant factors identified in this study. So this person is actually making comparisons with existing literature.
Yes, bearing in mind also that what's the purpose of this study? They've pulled from the literature various factors, and now they're trying to validate them. They're trying to draw up a model that will be useful. So partly the literature provides some of the data in a way. Okay. You're quite right. I mean, they have referred to the data, but just bear in mind that the data has also provided them with this initial analysis, which they are validating and refining, as it were. Okay. Any other group had something that they wanted to say, maybe about the discussion? Where does the discussion begin? Or where do you see evidence of discussion happening rather than results? Because certainly, if you go under results validation process, when I read it first, I thought, but actually they're talking a whole lot of sort of methodological stuff here. So in a way, there's a lot of overlap between the sections. Now, what do you think? Is this okay? Unlikely to be very well looked upon by supervisors and examiners in a dissertation. But remember, this is an article, so it's a little bit different. They're pushing a whole lot of stuff in together, so I think one might find that sort of thing. Where did you actually find some discussion? I sort of thought discussion was, it sort of really only came into its own on the last page.
Yep. Definitely.
I don't know if you agree with that.
The research has confirmed.
Yeah. So, well, almost like at the end of the bit before that, as a result of the factor analysis, the original theoretical model and associated hypotheses formulated were revised. So that's really the sort of finding. We've had to revise them. They started off with 5 primary determinants, and then the actual finding, the research has confirmed that the factors have significant impact. The literature revealed that, so they're going back again. These are now the findings. The literature has shown this, and our study has shown something else. Notice limitations come into that section quite a bit as well. They keep on saying more research needs to be done, and there needs to be a collaborative effort. And then the next section, based on the current literature and the significant factors, the use of the knowledge tree model was seen as an ideal comparison. I was quite interested in the language used here, because previously we've just had very straightforward either past, because this is what we did, or present tense, because this is the case, but no real confident assertions. But look at this here. The tree model is seen as an ideal comparison. So trying to make some sort of stronger claims here, and talks about the model of the tree and how everything fits together, etc. It's all a bit vague, but anyway. But he's got his figure there. Notice the reference to the tables in the previous section, where he's actually pulled out. Now, I thought this was quite interesting. If you go back to page 5, you can see how the tables are selecting the important information. Table 1 indicates that and explains this. Table 2 indicates that, and there are 3 factors identified, and then things were removed. Table 3 indicates that, etc. So the tables actually frame the process and pick out the important, significant things. Did you notice, just as a little minor detail, that the difference between the legend, the heading for the tables and the figures? Tables come at the top.
Yeah.
All right. The figure on the last page is below so the caption and figure 2 occurs below the figure. Okay,
Is that the norm?
that's the norm.
That's the norm. Okay.
That's the norm. And it's actually very fascinating getting ready for these things, because I'd go through all these funny little funny trawls for information. I actually tried to find out why.
Why should it
is
be?
there a difference?
Yes.
Because it's one thing to say this is the convention, but why? And there's a whole, I came across a whole sort of theory about, and I don't know, I'm just sharing it with you, I don't know how authoritative it is, but that our brains process, and I'm sure this sounds sensible, our brains process text, which is tables or text or figures, differently from pictures. So what happens is that with a table, you get the main idea first, as it were, the overall main idea. But when it comes to a picture or a diagram, your brain processes it completely differently. So you're looking at the whole field, as it were, of the picture as an integrated whole. So you would not look at the heading. I don't know whether this is true, but it sort of sounds as if it might be quite sensible. And I always remember tabletop. Tabletop. Okay. Table comes on the top, figure comes below. It's a useful, not highly scholarly, but it's a convention.
But some examiners will absolutely go through all and say this is not got to be moved around.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But it is the convention. And remember, going back to the first workshop, you are positioning yourself as a scholar. And one of the ways in which you do it is by paying attention to scholarly conventions. So that's why examiners sometimes seem so nitpicky. It's because they're wanting to see that you actually are aware of the conventions and are applying them, because then you are aligning yourself with the scholarly community. So it may seem like a small thing, but it says something to an examiner about how you see yourself and how you're presenting yourself in your research writing. Okay. Yes, I thought the conclusion was interesting as well in terms of the language. You see, the conclusion definitely looks back at the work. The study has confirmed and exposed the two significant factors, so it repeats the findings again. And locates it in the bigger picture. Can you see that? For leaders to use in their pursuit of enabling the KM agenda in public sector organizations. So putting the whole thing into the context again. Further research may look at amounts spent by government organizations on technology. So providing ideas for further research and deeper research into the organizational culture and questions such as why people share, etc. And then look how this writer has, or these writers have decided to generalize to